Hey friends, welcome back to the Invisible Strength series, where we are featuring athletes across the country who are overcoming incredible adversity due to autoimmune diseases. Today is absolutely no different. Today's guest may have even set the bar higher for inspiration and accomplishments. Honored to welcome a Paralympic triathlete, Amy Dixon. She competed for Team USA at the 2020 Tokyo Paralympic Games. She's also a four-time national champion in tandem cycling. Unbelievable. We'll get into her incredible story of overcoming adversity, including losing her eyesight to a rare form of juvenile rheumatic arthritis at age 32. I've been following Amy on Instagram and her No Sights, No Limits camp and what they do for blind triathletes. Truly, truly incredible. I'm so honored and excited to get to know you and hear more about your story. Thank you for being here.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
Before we get into where you're at now and all the crazy things you're doing, like downhill skiing, can you tell us more about you as a person and your journey?
Do you want me to start kind of with my diagnosis or just me in general?
How about you as a person before you as a patient?
I like that. So, yeah, I grew up in the Northeast on a little horse farm about an hour and a half north of New York City. Grew up riding horses, in school. I was a swimmer from the time I was 5 years old up until all through high school. So I was on the swim team, very active. I played tennis in high school. I played soccer. I played goalie because I hated running. I was like, I'll just stand here and catch balls. This is great. The same thing. Tennis, like you have to run like 5 feet and that's it. I was like, this is the perfect sport for me. And same thing riding horses. I was like, I don't have to move. I just sit here. So the perfect lazy, I got my
Very efficient
lazy
sports.
person sport. So yeah, I went to the University of Connecticut to study pharmacy and then later Tokyo Post University studying equine business management. And while I was working in college, I was also a sommelier in the restaurant industry at night in order to pay for school because I could use my nose and my palate. At the time, I had recently been diagnosed with my eye disease, so needed to find an alternative career. And I worked for 20 years in the wine industry, in retail, restaurant, and on the importing sides of the business. Worked for a big French wine company and a chain of stores in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut as their buyer. And then later rediscovered my athletic journey at around age 37 and started competing in paratriathlon. So, kind of the rest is history. But I moved around quite a bit for my job in different parts of Connecticut. So I lived all over the state, but primarily New York and Connecticut was my hub. And then I moved out to San Diego 8 years ago to train full time for the Tokyo Paralympic Games. And I haven't looked back because the weather's so darn nice here. It's kind of hard to leave. Expensive as heck, but the way I look at it is, it's expensive back in New York too. I'd much rather be looking at a beach than concrete.
That's right. That's right. That's
If I'm
awesome.
going to pay good money to live somewhere, I'd like I want a beach view.
You want a view, exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's kind of been it. And I went back to riding horses a little while ago. I taught for a while. I was certified in therapeutic riding. So yeah, so I still have my hands kind of in it with my equestrian side of life. Ironically, as a kid, I remember watching the 84 Olympics in LA and thinking that I wanted to become an equestrian Olympian. And I went to the National Horse Show every year. I competed on a national level with my horse. And then, kind of life took a turn. So here we are.
I hear that. With all these challenges, but also just overcoming those challenges, talk to us a bit about your approach to training, your approach to competition. Like I'm always fascinated and amazed by just the attention to detail athletes have, especially like Paralympians would have, when it comes to like preparing for competition and the competition itself. So, as you're articulating it, also, if you can, just also think about what advice you give to other athletes who are trying to adjust based on the adversities that they're facing.
Honestly, there's no dead ends to anything. There's just a different way of doing things, right? So, I run into people all the time and say, "Oh, you're so inspiring. I could never do a triathlon." I said, Yeah, you absolutely could. I just watched a guy with no arms do one. And so, it's you're just choosing not to. Or you just can't imagine it for yourself. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Or you just don't want
Yeah.
to. It's not like I desperately want to do a triathlon. If that's not something that appeals to you, that's okay. Just say that. But like that you can't is I call BS on that. So again, like I spent the weekend skiing last weekend in Boise, Idaho, and one of the guys that I was skiing with is a triple amputee. He's missing both of his legs and one of his arms, and he was snowboarding with me, and I had a hard time keeping up with him. The guy was freaking fast, and he
Yeah.
has two tiny prostheses that lock him onto the snowboard, and he's got one arm, and he's got like a short pole with a ball on the end of it. And that's how he kind of pushes himself up if he falls down. And the guy can carve and shred. And I was like, so again, I look at as far as training, there's a lot of difficulty in training for everybody, able-bodied or para. And you just have to find a different way of doing things and be a little bit creative.
Amy, you have such a upbeat and good energy about you. And talking about there's always another way. Have you always had that mindset?
Yeah, if you ask my mother, I was an incredibly stubborn child. She said if she had me first, she wouldn't have had a second, basically. I was like, oh yeah, because I mean, like, I did not take no for an answer, and I still don't. So my poor mother, bless her heart.
Always finding a way. You were always
Just
finding a way.
being that pain in the butt kid who's just like throwing a temper tantrum, like, but I want to do this. It's like, well, and I give a lot of credit to my mom. She's like, well, then fine, either work for it or figure it out. If you want that, then like, I don't have the money to support it. I don't have the time, but you figure out a way. And so, I joined the 4-H club when I was 8 years old, which is a local agriculture club, primarily focused on horses. And so I just had the bus drop me off at my 4-H leader's house every day. We couldn't afford a horse growing up. My mom was a single parent. And if I wanted to do it, like, I had to figure out a way to pay for it. So I just worked off in the afternoons after school, cleaning saddles and grooming the horses and cleaning stalls in exchange for riding lessons. And, again, from 8 years old, like, that was just the way it was done in my family. If you wanted something, you had to work for it. And so I think instilling those values, like, nothing is going to, she would have loved to give it to me if she could, but she didn't have the money. So she said, just figure it out. And same thing, I wanted to go to college, and there was no money available for me. And so she said, figure it out. So I was lifeguarding all through high school and just saved money and got grants and scholarships. And that's how I was able to go to college.
It is. Yeah, just thinking about that sort of, I think especially with young people, there's so many gifts that they have, so many attributes that they have that can be frustrating for the adults in their lives. But all that sort of like, what could be
Just wait
described
40
as
years, it'll
stubbornness.
pan out.
I'm telling you, what could be described as stubbornness really pays off like, oh, this is what allowed that person to, overcome and to really persevere. So that's just a word for all the adults who have, tough kids in their lives. Like,
Bless their
just
hearts.
let
I
them
mean,
cook.
my mom was really young when she had us, and I'm
Yeah.
sure we gave her gray hairs before 30. So,
True, true. And my kids that say they're like, "Why do you have this gray hair?" I was like, "This is why you didn't clean up your room.
yeah.
This is why you didn't do that."
But again, it's taught me resilience. It's taught me a good work ethic. My mom was, single and self-employed her whole life. She owned her own wallpaper business and was very physical, lifting ladders and scaffold. And so, I saw how hard she worked and for things that she wanted. And so that was a really good role model for me growing up and figuring out, like, if I want something, I just have to work for it.
But with that, as tough as you are and have demonstrated yourself to be, like, what have been the things that have made you say, I don't know if I can do this? Like, I'm hearing you just say, like, you just gotta want to do it, you just gotta try to do it, like you can overcome things. But what have been the things in your life where you're just like, this is too much? Like, I don't know how I'm gonna overcome it. And if you
Yeah.
overcame it, what allowed you to get through it?
Well, honestly, I grew up in a suburb outside of New York City, and I had never seen somebody who was visually impaired or blind before,
Yeah.
except for panhandlers on the subway.
Gotcha,
So
gotcha.
it's like the whole, if you can't see it, you can't achieve it, or you don't believe it. And so when I got diagnosed with blinding eye disease and autoimmune disease, that I immediately assumed that I was going to be homeless, that I wasn't going to be able to have a
Yes.
job, that I wasn't going to be
Right.
employable, that I was going to be a burden to society, that I was going to have to live at home with my family, all of those things. So, if your only frame of reference is seeing a guy in a wheelchair, sitting in the subway, begging for change,
Right.
like, how are you supposed to imagine like that you're going to be a wheelchair athlete, doing archery or playing basketball, like that's not
Right,
even
right.
so not in your wheelhouse because like
Hmm.
Right.
never even seen that or heard that that's possible.
Hmm.
So yeah, so again, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So, it wasn't until getting introduced to para sport that I met people who were visually impaired attorneys and federal court judges and probate judges and guys that climbed Mount Kilimanjaro and did all these incredible things. And one who was several who were physical therapists, one who's a doctor of geriatric medicine. But again, I didn't know any better because I had never seen
Sure.
that.
Yeah, you hadn't seen an example of it.
Amy, can you walk us through that transition of going from that dark place of thinking you may have to live with your family and not seeing a lot of hope to then meeting these para athletes and then seeing a whole new way of life?
It was hard. I lived in denial for a while after my diagnosis, and just kind of carried on my way and ignored it for a good 6 years until it came out of remission, and then I lost more vision. And yeah, it wasn't until I had to, really stop driving and stop working and all those things that it hit me. A friend of mine that I worked with in the wine industry introduced me to her neighbor who was visually impaired, or kept saying, "Hey, my neighbor's blind. You should meet him." And I was like, "What do you think? Like all blind people hang out? Like I don't want to hang out with your blind neighbor. Like, it's just like
Listen,
blind for
it's
drinking.
there's that there somewhere.
Just because he's blind doesn't mean we have anything in common." And I was like, "And I'm not blind. I just have trouble seeing." It's like I didn't
Right.
categorize myself as blind.
No
I didn't
doubt.
identify because I still had some residual vision. My only
Sure.
experience was with people with total blindness. I didn't know that
Yeah.
95% of the visually impaired population have some usable vision. It's only
Okay.
5% are totally blind. So that's very rare to be totally blind. And so I was like, I don't want to meet this guy and his dog, and that's not me. It took me like it took
You
me
weren't
like
having it.
oh, I was not having it. I was like, no, no. It's nice that you have a blind neighbor. That's so sweet. And it wasn't like, and he like kept leaving me voicemails and emails, and he's like, that Scotty wants us to meet, and I was like, yeah, I'm really busy. And then finally, I started going through immunosuppressive therapy for my disease, and I was experiencing extreme vertigo where I couldn't walk. So I was in my apartment, and my mother had been staying with me for the first few weeks of treatment, but then she had to go home for a couple days to get some more clothing because we had a big snowstorm coming. And so I remember just crawling on my hands and knees in my apartment to go to like the bathroom or go get something out of the fridge, and having to like pull on the fridge to pull myself up, and because I couldn't stand. And I was like, I had that guy's number in my pocket, and I was like, oh, I guess I gotta call this guy. Like, you're sitting on you're sitting on the floor of your apartment. Your brand new convertible is sitting outside that you can't drive anymore. Like, maybe it's time that you admit that you might have a little bit of a problem. So I picked up the number and I called him, and he was so nice. He's like, I've been waiting for your call. And he was just like, as if I had talked to him the day before. So just like said, let's meet for coffee. I was like, I don't know how to do that. I can't leave my house. So he came up to me and was like explaining like how this all works and what services I needed to go ahead and apply for. And he kind of got my head on straight because he had me focus on being task oriented. Like, okay, you need to call the Board of Education and Services for the Blind. You need to do this. You need to call Social Security. You need to apply for Social Security. I'm just like, this is a lot. This is a lot. I did like, but it was good because I was spinning my wheels, not having anything to do other than feel sorry for myself and wish that I was back in my office and doing my job and thinking about my coworkers trying to manage without me. And I was kind of the in charge, and I left them during a really busy time. And I was so pissed because these immunosuppressive drugs were supposed to be very quote unquote mild and with little or no side effects. And here I was crawling around my apartment because I couldn't stand up. So I was like, so I was pretty angry, but yeah, I'm really good at not being upset. I'm better at anger and putting that anger into action. Because for me, being upset is like a state of non-action, but being angry, I can use that. That's fuel.
Yeah.
So that's what I did.
that. I want to go back to something you said earlier. We talked about not being able to be what you can't see. Now being someone that others can aspire to be. Like, how do you deal with that sense of actually being an inspiration? And what have you found most fulfilling about that? And what's been difficult about that? People are looking to you as an example of, okay, Amy did this, so maybe I can do it too. Like how do you deal with that?
I love it. I mean, I love meeting young kids. I love meeting their parents and, saying, listen, it sounds so strange to say, but your kid is like born at the right time in history. Had any of us been born like 30 years prior, our outcomes would have been very, very different, both
Right.
medically and you know, uh, as vocationally, like we wouldn't be working, we wouldn't be, or we would be
Right.
working very menial jobs, doing some sort of assembly using our fingers and things
True.
like that, versus now where there's every piece of technology on the planet that allows me to, see in a different way.
Yeah.
There's apps on my phone. I have an app called Seeing AI, and I can take a picture of anything and it reads it out loud to me. It'll read me a page of my notes. It'll read me the barcode. If I go to the grocery store to get cereal,
Come on.
it'll tell me what currency I'm holding in my hand if I'm in a taxi and I need to pay the
Yeah.
driver and I don't want to get ripped off. Like all those things are mainstream now, and not just for the blind but for our aging population as well. Like, so and the pandemic, as horrible as it was for a lot of people, a lot of good came out of it, because built a lot of empathy, I think, for people that are isolated and at home, like people with
Mhm.
disabilities can be, and also prove that we can work from home. And so people with disabilities or, immune disorders that have a hard time working in public spaces because of their being immunocompromised now suddenly have the power to have very high paying jobs that they can work from home. So I tell people with their kids, again, your kid is born at the right time in history, and now is such a great time because you can be anything you want to be. Like, whereas again, we're talking 30 years ago, that was a different story.
That's wonderful.
Amy,
That's wonderful.
referencing now that we have learned so much about how social isolation can really have an impact on you, how has your para athletes, but then also your broader community impacted your journey through this?
Gosh, they've been, it's an incredibly supportive network that I have, because, when you see somebody in a wheelchair, people think, oh gosh, he lost his legs or he's paralyzed. That must be so hard. And they think about the mobility challenges. People don't think that, like, wow, that person has chronic infections because they can't feel their bladder, like, and so like
Yeah.
they don't think about that. There's a lot more to paralysis or being an amputee than just missing your leg. And same
Yes.
thing, and it's, like us with immune disorders. So like he may deal with chronic infections. My friend Howie, he's been in a wheelchair for years, and we were at a race in Japan together, and somebody pulled his wetsuit off and he doesn't have any feeling below the waist, and didn't know that he scratched his butt on the pavement. And about a month later, he was septic and in the hospital with like
Yeah.
106 fever. And he was in the hospital for
Oh,
3 months and had multiple
Goodness.
surgeries to debride the wound. Just from what
Oh,
would be a scratch for you and I that we would
right.
feel became life threatening sepsis to
Yeah.
him. So
Yes.
the things that you take for granted, that it's not that I've been surrounded by my teammates. I have a good friend who's an amputee, and they get these pressure sores from their prosthesis, or if they get an ingrown hair, which is really common because the
Right.
prosthesis rubs against their leg, that can
Right.
go from one day being annoying to the next day they're in the hospital on IV antibiotics. So
okay.
again, like there are so many challenges that people don't see, and they just see this person in a wheelchair and like they think that their difficulty is over, that they had the
Yeah.
surgery or they had the accident and then they just live their life in a wheelchair or with a prosthesis, and they don't realize that that person has a lot of difficulties that you can't imagine. And same thing for me, people think that blindness is my biggest disability. It is not in any way, shape, or form my greatest disability. My immune disorder is far, far, far more challenging and is going to be a lifelong fight for me, and difficulty and inconsistencies in how I feel and how I have to treat it and how I have to move through my day than blindness. Blindness happened and I've adjusted to it, and there's some finality to that, right? It was an
Yeah.
incident. And I mean, I still have a little bit of vision. I have 2% of vision out of my left eye. It's like looking through like a little keyhole like this. And I can only
Mhm.
see this part of your face if I'm standing at a conversational distance away. Everything else is black around that for me. But that's been fairly stable for me for the past 5 years. And that may be how I see the rest of my life. Unlikely, I'll probably lose that too, given my history. But we've held on to that for a long time. My bigger disability is my immune disorder that has been life threatening. I've had multiple pulmonary embolisms. I've been in the
Yes.
ICU.
Yes.
I've had so many surgeries related to it. I'm on thousands and thousands of dollars of medications per month. And those are the things that people don't see when they look at me. They're like, oh, you're blind and you have a cute dog and you use a cane. I'm like, this is the easy part, man. Like,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
I can do this all day.
For sure.
I've been
For
trained to
sure.
do this. The other thing, like, I don't think there's any way to prepare yourself for what immune disease does to you.
But you mentioned earlier just the way that having to have gone through quarantine helped all of us with empathy. What do you see as still the growing edges? As you're trying to explain, yes, I am dealing with blindness, and I know that's the part that you're paying attention to, but there are invisible aspects of this that you can't necessarily understand unless you've gone through. Like, what do you see as like the growing edges of empathy and how we can help educate the public on, just exactly what the day-to-day life is for all of us.
I mean, people would be horrified if they knew what my day to day life looked like. But, it's like you don't want to garner sympathy. You want to garner empathy, which is
Yes.
different. You want
Yes.
people to like, I don't need anybody's like, oh, I'm so sorry you're dealing with that. I'm like, well,
Right.
thanks. And like, here's how you can help. Or here's how, if you're going through something similar, how you can take the skills that I've learned and
Mhm.
translate it into making your outcome better or more palatable or easier for you or your child or whomever in your life is dealing with a difficulty. Yeah, I think that people would be really, really shocked to see my typical day. I wish that people understood that you kind of want to wear a sign on your head, like, this is the easy part. Like, um,
Yeah, yeah.
trust me, I've got this. Like, you don't need to help me
Hmm.
up and down the stairs. I've got a dog for that. I've got a cane for that. Where I need your help is like, going to your local politicians and, fighting for Medicare to cover more of these, specialty medications that I'm on that are thousands of dollars per month. I need, to go lobby the drug companies and get these things covered by Medicare. Those are where people can actually help and make an impact and realize your vote and your voice really, really matters. It may not affect you directly, but God forbid you ever get cancer or your child is diagnosed with immune disorder. Man, you're gonna have a harsh reality when it comes down to it. So really think about A, what you're voting for, and B, where and how you spend your money.
Wise
Yeah.
words.
Yeah.
Wise words.
Amy, can you share more about your autoimmune disorder and your experience?
The onset of my disease was at 10 years old. I had a rheumatic
Gotcha.
fever called erythema nodosum, and it causes these large nodules to form on your legs. And at the time, it's just like these big bony lesions. It was very painful. And I had a very high fever of like 100 and it lasted for days and days. And I had very red eyes. And at the time, my mother, I didn't have health insurance. And so my mom took me to the pediatrician and they thought that it was pink eye initially. And they treated me for pink eye. And it was not. It turned out to be iritis. And by the time we finally got to see an ophthalmologist, he kind of yelled at my mom and said, why didn't you bring her in sooner? It's like, she didn't know. How was she supposed to know? Like, that was
Yeah.
not something that, you have red eyes, you think your kid's got pink eyes. It's completely logical. And so I was put on steroid drops and ointment. My vision was severely compromised for the time. I think I was out of school for about a month from my recollection. And at the time they said this is either an acute incident or this is going to be a lifelong disease. And so I got better. Had no symptoms all through high school. And in college, I was working full time in the restaurant business at night to pay for school and working at school during the day, burning the candle at both ends. And at night, everything started strobing and flashing one day. And then kind of when you look at the sun and you look away and you see spots in front of your eyes for a minute.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so I would rub my eyes and it would kind of go away after a few minutes. So I didn't think anything of it. Again, I didn't have health insurance. I could not afford to go to the doctor. And so I didn't think anything was wrong with me. I just thought I was overtired. And so I kept thinking, well, when the semester's over or after midterms are over, I'll take a couple of days off and I'll be fine. that didn't happen. And then I fell down the stairs because I tripped over my boyfriend's dog because I didn't see it. And I was like, I know I looked and he wasn't there. I know he wasn't there. And I'm like, am I crazy? And so then I was driving home at night from the restaurant late at night, and I was having a really hard time with the glare of oncoming cars where I got run off the road. And I didn't get into an accident, but scared the heck out of me.
Sure.
And I've had chronic migraines since I was 9. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll go see my neurologist, because sometimes with migraine, you can get what's called an aura, around like halos around things. I had never had that type of migraine before, but I thought, well, your body's changing. Maybe this is evolving. It seemed like a logical explanation. So I saved up my tips because it was like $200 to go see a specialist. And I went to see him, and he was really, really nice to me because he knew I was in pharmacy school and I was poor, and he gave me lots of samples of my meds so that I could afford them. And he's asking about school and how things are going. And he asked me, how many fingers he was holding up, and he held his hands out to the side all the way out. And I said, your arms are missing. I said, you're cut off like right here at the shoulder. And he's like, oh, come on, kiddo, don't kid around. I said, no, like your arms are just black. There's nothing there. You have no arms. And he's like, okay, then. He's like, did you have a blow to the head recently? And I had actually had a concussion from a horse like 2 months prior. And he goes, well, it's possible you detached your retina. And if that's the case, he's like, you got to have surgery like today. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, that's crazy. And so I said, surgery, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm like, just give me my meds. I'm out of here. I'm fine. Like, detached retina, you're being dramatic. And so he called his secretary. He canceled all of his afternoon appointments because I was just going to bolt. I was just going to go home. And I had to be at the restaurant in like an hour. It's a Friday night, it's a busy night. I need the money. I got to go hustle. And he says, no, you're not going anywhere. So he marched me downstairs and took me to the ophthalmologist. And they looked in the back of my eye and immediately said, when was the last time you were sick? And I said, that's an odd question to ask since we're talking about my eyesight. Yeah. And I said, I had a sinus infection like 8 weeks ago. And he goes, that's it. And I said, can somebody please clue me in on what's going on? They said you have a ton of scar tissue in the back of your eye, which indicates that an overactive immune system that is attacking your retina and sending antibodies against it. And your eye is like a mirror. And if you picture like a bullseye, all around the edge of the bullseye is all scar tissue. So that vision is permanently erased, because the way your retina works is the light comes in, hits the retina and reflects back out. And that's the image that we see. But if it's hitting scar tissue, it has nothing to reflect off of. The image is black. So I was losing from the outside in my vision, getting smaller and smaller. So every time I got exposed to a bacteria or virus, it would form more scar tissue closer and closer and closer to the middle of my vision until it was completely gone. So the plan was to put me on high dose steroids, which worked. I gained 75 pounds on the steroids. I was miserable because I was an athlete and it was pretty uncomfortable in a different body than I was used to, but it worked. It put my disease into remission. And then my doctor said, just don't get sick. He goes,
Very simple.
Just no big deal. Like he goes, he's like a Jewish New Yorker. He's like, don't get anything with an itis at the end of it. And I was like, and I'm like, okay, no problem. He's like, no sinusitis, no rhinitis, no bronchitis, none of that stuff. And so I'm like, okay, that's practical. So like, what do I do? Walk around in like a bubble? So
basically,
yeah. So I managed to stay pretty healthy for 6 years. Again, I got bronchitis and it erased a little bit more of my vision. We put me back on steroids. And then at age 32, the steroids stopped work. I came out of remission again after pneumonia, and it erased most of my remaining vision pretty quickly within a couple of weeks. And so at that time, the steroids were no longer working. And we met with a doctor up in Boston and who gave me a couple options. One was immunosuppression and the other one was surgery. So initially we went through immunosuppression. I went through a variety of different immunosuppressive drugs and chemotherapy drugs, and to the point where at the beginning of my story where I was having to crawl around on the floor because the side effects caused such extreme vertigo. I couldn't walk, I couldn't drive. I'm still driving at this point. I couldn't walk, I couldn't drive, I couldn't, stand up. And so we finally realized that that's probably not the drug for me. And
Yeah.
I said, well, I need to get back to work. I'm going to get fired from my job. And so we opted at that time, or just had been approved by the FDA, these implants that are tiny steroid implants about the size of a grain of rice. And my doctor in Boston had worked on the clinical trials of it and had gotten it pushed through. And it's surgically implanted in the back of the eye, and it lasts like 2 to 3 years, where it releases steroids directly into the eye at the source without any of the systemic side effects of steroids. Because steroids, as you know, I ended up gaining a ton of weight. I ended up with osteoporosis, and I ended up with adrenal insufficiency because my body said, oh, well, I'm getting all this steroid from outside sources. I don't need to produce cortisol anymore.
Yeah.
So it was a cascade of symptoms caused by the steroids. They do a really good job, but they're not targeted, unfortunately, as we know, towards the specific disease that you want it to. And none of these drugs are. They're systemic drugs that affect all of your system. And when I decided to go with the surgery, it was because I was on a drug, an immunosuppressive drug, that within 90 days, I developed a malignant melanoma and had to have surgery to have it removed. And that was a common side effect of that drug. So I thought, you know what, at the time, I'm like, hey, nobody died of losing their eyesight unless they fall off a bridge or a building.
Come on.
Like,
Come on.
so I'm like, let's, I don't need cancer and to be blind.
Yeah.
That
Right.
just kind of sucks. So,
Yes.
so that's when I opted to stop the immunosuppressive drugs and start the surgery, which worked. It did a really good job. Unfortunately, anytime you put a high dose of steroid inside the eye, it causes increased ocular pressure, which is known as glaucoma. But it was a calculable risk. It was a Hail Mary because I was down to, again, about 5% of usable vision, and I was either going to lose all of my sight within a month, or we were just going to have to try this and hope that it worked. And it did. I had 3 years of stability, no problems. And then when they went to replace my implants with new ones, the fresh steroid caused the glaucoma, and I had to have multiple glaucoma surgeries. I have now, in the past 10 years, had 42 eye surgeries.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. I said at 50,
42.
they should get me like a permanent Waymo account, like where I get a driverless car,
Yeah.
drive me around. It'd be great.
That's it. Let's say, what's the rewards program? Something
Right?
like that. Punch my card. I got another surgery.
Free bus pass for the rest of my life. I
Something.
don't know.
That's right. That's right.
So, but
Give
yeah,
them
so
some perks.
it's been a challenging road with my disease.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, 90% of uveitis patients, or uveitis is my inflammatory eye disease, also have irritable bowel syndrome. So it was affecting my GI tract because the cells in your eye are rapidly replicating cells, and also the cells in your skin, because your skin's constantly regenerating itself, and your GI tract, because you constantly have food moving through it, also are rapidly replicating cells. So all those cells are damaged when you have uveitis. So a lot of people have psoriatic arthritis, which affects the skin, or psoriasis and things like that. My mother has psoriasis and arthritis. She does not have rheumatoid arthritis. She does have osteoporosis. My sister has lupus and psoriasis as well. My guide dog is way ambitious to try to get through this whole interview. She's
It's all good.
playing tug
We're
of war
here.
with
We're here.
Oh,
All love.
her name is Bombay. She's only 3, so she's a baby. The arthritis component didn't come about until Tokyo in 2020. And that was pretty devastating. There is a possibility. I'm a huge fan of vaccines, and I'm a huge fan of the COVID vaccine, and I have no regrets. But pretty quickly after I got my first dose of the COVID vaccine, I had a pretty severe migraine that ended me up in the hospital. I got hit up with a lot of steroid IV, and then within 3 weeks, my shoulder swelled up to the point that it was dislocating every night while I slept.
Oh.
And couldn't figure out why. I hadn't, training was altered because of the pandemic. All the pools were closed, gyms were closed. So I was training at home. Nothing had changed. I wasn't doing an incredible volume of swimming that warranted having a swollen shoulder. Finally went to go get an MRI, and the doctor said, when was the last time you saw your rheumatologist? And I thought, gosh, because I hadn't had any issues my whole life with rheumatic arthritis.
Right.
Other than the eye disease. And I thought I had kind of dodged a bullet my whole life. And it was just the perfect storm. Whatever brought on the onset, whether it was the vaccine, which I don't know. It's entirely speculation, or it was the migraine or the steroids or just the stress At the time of dealing with the pandemic and having the Paralympics being delayed a year, I was in the best shape of my life leading into 2020. I was ranked number 2 in the world, and I was number one in the United States. I had had an undefeated season prior, and so I was as ready as I could ever be, and I was prepared to bring home a medal for my country. And suddenly, my shoulder was dislocating every night, and because I had osteoporosis, I also had a rare form of osteoporosis caused by my immune disorder called hypophosphatasia, where I have low bone phosphatase. So my collarbone, for some reason, was spongy, like literally you could press on it and dent it. And it was pulling off fragments of bone from my collarbone every time my shoulder dislocated at night. So it went from having an MRI and being like, gee, you've got some fluid in the joint, you should go see a rheumatologist, to a month later being like, you need surgery. So, and during that time, we started on anti-TNF drugs, immunosuppressive drugs for the arthritis. We tried steroid injections. We tried platelet-rich plasma injections. We tried everything to Band-Aid this shoulder. Ended up with surgery. 7 weeks later, I had bilateral multiple pulmonary embolisms, ended up in the ICU during COVID, which was a terrible, terrible time. And then I gained 45 pounds out of nowhere. And I wasn't on steroids. It was just my body was reacting to all this inflammation. And so I went from being able to run a 6-minute mile to barely being able to breathe while walking up the stairs. So I was convinced that my Paralympic dream was over. And so we're now, 7 months out from the Paralympic Games. And I was like, how is this even possible? Like, I can barely walk right now, let alone run, bike, or swim. I was really blessed that the doctor that had treated me in the hospital, she's a hospitalist, but she also is in private practice and she does house calls. And she was my age. She was a runner and she had gone through a pulmonary embolism due to birth control pills. And she said, listen, it's not easy, but I'm going to walk you through this and we're going to get you back. She goes, it may not be back where you were, but let's, we'll work on this together. And she held my hand through the whole process. It was really, really tough. It took a whole team of a lot of doctors, like cardiologists, pulmonologists, endocrinologists, rheumatologist, hematologist. I mean, you name it. Everybody was all hands on deck. And then just trying to figure out how to get me safely back to exercise, again, with another 45 pounds on my body, which we tried Lasix. We tried everything. We tried sitting in a sauna and garbage bags. We tried everything, compression gear to try to get this weight off of me. And it just wouldn't go. And I was like mortified, and I developed an eating disorder. I stopped eating because I was convinced that I was like, somehow my metabolism was not working. So why keep feeding it was my stunted logic at the time, and my desperation, because I was desperate to look and feel like I had prior to this incident, and nothing seemed to work. And it was incredibly frustrating, but slowly but surely I was coming back, but I missed most of the season of qualifying for Tokyo. My ranking was number 2. And because I wasn't racing, other people were getting ranked higher and higher from me. Only the top 10 go to Tokyo. And I got bumped down to number 9. I was right on the bubble because I couldn't race. I wasn't healthy enough to race. And I knew that all I needed to do was to have this one Hail Mary race at the end of June, which was the end of the qualification period. And I just needed to cross the finish line within 25% of my teammate in order to qualify. So I knew she was going to win and she would get to go to Tokyo, but like I could also go as long as I finished within 25%. And she didn't slow down for me, but she certainly didn't go all out because we were just basically racing head to head for our slots to check the box. But she's like, I'll do whatever it takes to help you get there. You've had a hell of a year. And so it was not how I imagined going to the Paralympic Games. And, and I really, really struggled going because I was going to be on international television in front of millions of people looking like a non-athlete. I mean, or just a very, very different athlete. And, and again, I went from running a 6-minute mile to running a 10-minute mile and struggling. But my guide, I race with a guide in triathlon. She's tethered to my waist when we swim and run, and we race on a tandem bike together. And she happens to be a PA or a physician's assistant. And so she kind of babysat me through the whole process, was helpful as far as making sure I was taking my meds on time. She went above and beyond. She was both doctor and caregiver and guide during and leading up to the games. And I had every doctor on speed dial. I was gone for basically a month, when you're at training camp and then you're over in Tokyo and getting acclimated to the time zone, which was a long time for me to be away from all these specialists. But Team USA had really, really good doctors on staff there with us in the Paralympic Village, and they had already communicated fully with my entire team back home as far as what I was going to need and what kind of care I was going to require and what to do kind of in an emergency with me. It was really touch and go up until the day of the race. I mean, 2 days before, I was vomiting profusely in the warm-up area. We were supposed to do a practice swim, and my guide said, listen, the water had a very high bacteria count. And like a lot of, you heard about this in Paris. And also we had the same thing in Tokyo where the
Okay.
bacteria levels were dangerously high. And the water was also 87 degrees. So really, really hot water.
Yeah.
So that combined, like my guide said, listen, you can't see anyway. You don't need to do the practice swim. She goes, I'm in charge of guiding you. I'll go do the practice swim. My immune system's fine. Like if I get exposed to the bacteria, I'm not going to like end up in the hospital. You are vomiting from the chemo meds that you're on right now. You stay in here in the air conditioning. I'll go do the practice swim. And I thought, like, how did this become my life? Like, this is so not how I imagined my one Paralympic experience being. This is like supposed to be the happiest and most fulfilling week of my life. And here I am just like dreading being seen in public in shorts or a t-shirt with my body. I'm mortified because I'm so slow. And here I am vomiting 2 days before the games, wondering if I'm going to be hydrated enough to race in 93-degree weather. So again, not how I imagined things going.
Challenge after challenge after challenge.
It was tough.
So when you're on this side of it now, and, right, like you're on this side of it now,
Still a
and you're
lot of
thinking about,
therapy.
yeah, I was gonna say, like, how are you processing all of this? Because it is, there's a certain thing I often uh think of it as like the Spike Lee dolly shot where you're just being like drawn through the event in life. Like, how are you processing all that you've gone through, and where do you go from here?
Excellent question. I'll let you know when I get there. But I have a great sports psychologist that I've been working with for the past 5 years. He specializes in athletes with eating disorder. I got in touch with him through the U.S. Olympic Committee when all this was going down. I see him weekly. I have a psychiatrist. I'm on, antidepressant and anti-anxiety meds. That has helped me tremendously. I ended up, because before the games, I was suicidal back, when all this was going on. The games were in August. In February, I was really not in a good place mentally. And I was really, really struggling. And so I had a good psychiatrist, good psychologist, and good friends that got me through that time. But it was not easy. I mean, like every day was really, really hard. And again, then putting myself in a calorie deprived state, which, as you know, doesn't exactly help with anxiety. If you're starving yourself, then your anxiety level goes up. And since the games, I struggled with that too afterwards because I was determined to get back to, my old self. And this is the thing that I continue to see in all these support groups online for runners with rheumatoid arthritis. And we all want to be back to whatever it was that we were before our diagnosis or before, the symptoms really became so debilitating. And so you have to kind of mourn that as a loss and be like, this is my new normal. And it's funny, I had an easier time accepting my blindness than this, because this is not logical or predictable or doesn't follow any one set pattern. Whereas, my vision's only going to get worse. It's never going to get better. So like, I know that and I'm like prepared for that. Whereas this is like, I'll have 3 great days and then 5 really bad ones, or I'll be fine for 3 months and then all of a sudden I can't walk. So there's no planning is really, really hard. And as you can imagine, as an athlete, my whole life is about schedules and planning and rigidity and focus and being very scheduled. And it's very difficult to schedule life when you just don't know how you're going to wake up tomorrow morning. And you can do everything right. You can do all the things. You can eat healthy. You can get lots of rest. I'm a big fan of sleep. Sleep is free. For those immune disorder sufferers, like if you don't sleep well, that should be your number one focus, is in finding ways to get yourself good quality 8 to 9, for those of us with immune disorders, minimum of 9 hours of sleep. Your body needs it. Your body absolutely needs it. And that is the cheapest, freest, you know, drug that you could possibly take. And I take my sleep very seriously. It is scheduled. There is nothing that will interfere with me getting 9 hours of sleep. Nothing. I will not go to a concert. I will go to bed at 7 o'clock if I have to. If I have to get up early the next day, it's fine. I'm very protective of that. And so I have managed, but it's still really hard. I mean, I just got another blow last week that my bone density has gotten significantly worse over the past year. They're not really sure why, but it means that I have to go on this really expensive daily injection, and I'm already injecting myself 4 days a week with different medications, and I'm already experiencing injection fatigue where I'm out of spots in my body. My stomach is so bruised, and all these pieces of scar tissue in my stomach from injecting myself. And now I have to do this every day for 2 years on a drug that I can't afford, and that we're still fighting with the insurance company. And my doctor said, worst case scenario, we'll sample it out, because it's, again, thousands of dollars a month. Another drug I'm on 17 different meds. And of those, 6 or 7 are not covered by insurance, not covered by Medicaid. Wow. So then you're on patient assistance programs. My day is constantly spent on the phone with either insurance companies or pharma companies applying for assistance, or on the phone with the nurse coordinator at the doctor's office trying to get either sampled or get a therapeutic or a use exemption through the pharma company or through my insurance. It's every day is a fight, and it is wearing. I'm not going to lie. And I'm not going to say that it doesn't get really overwhelming and frustrating, because it does. I vent to my friends. I stay focused on the task at hand, which is trying to maintain the best quality of life that I can. I've had to put my athletic career on hold this year because I'm just not healthy enough to race at the level that I'm accustomed to, and just racing for the sake of racing makes no sense to me. Like, that's, I've won 8 national titles now. Like, I've four in cycling and 4 in triathlon. Does 9 really do anything for me? No. I mean, like, yes, it's super nice, but it doesn't win me money. It doesn't get me status on the national team. It doesn't get me funding from Team USA. There's no advantage to me for going back and doing that. Where I can have an impact is using this time to get healthy, do the best I can for my body, and then use my story to help other people, and mentor. I've got a bunch of visually impaired athletes that I mentor through my camp and that I'm coaching, and to make an impact in the pharma industry. I'm starting a patient advocacy class to get people certified who are low vision, to help them get jobs in healthcare.
Very cool.
And so they will get the certification that I've created through the American Academy of Ophthalmology, so they can work in healthcare and get off of Social Security disability and be contributing members of society. I'm trying to use all that energy that I'd normally be putting into training into something that's going to help other people and kind of help them cut the line from the learning curve that I had to go through as somebody who was a disease sufferer that had to make a lot of mistakes and kind of learn and bumble through it. Now, if I can kind of help them navigate that quicker and easier with somebody who's been through this, then I feel like I'm doing the right thing with the time that I have.
Amy, you truly exemplify invisible strength, and I appreciate your mentality of one step at a time, but it's not an option to stop. You just keep going. Before we wrap up, I want you to share where people can find you.
Yeah, on Instagram. I'm mostly on Instagram and co-post to Facebook. My handle is No Sight, No Limits. My website is amydixonusa.com. So AMYDIXON USA.com. Feel free, people that are going through this too. It takes a village and community and support, and I'm here for it. So feel free to DM me. I'm happy to be an ear or give people resources, whether that's mental health or steer people in the direction of certain doctors and specialists. One of the blessings of having gone through 42 surgeries and having lots of specialists and being involved in the Olympic and Paralympic pipeline is that I have access to some of the best doctors in the country. So I'm happy to make those connections for people that are struggling to find the right caregiver and get them in the door with those people.
It does truly take a village. Thank you so much for being willing to be a resource. Chris, thank you. And to our community, keep striving. Take care.
Thanks for having me.